The 1950s was a golden age for British comics, but a new generation of popular characters was emerging, not from the likes of the Dandy or Beano, but from the television screen. It was inevitable that comics and television should meet head-on.
The four feathers on this hat are magic. They enable Tex Tucker's dog and horse to speak, and his guns to fire without him even touching them. And now, another exciting adventure from Four Feather Falls.
Supercar, supercar.
The fact of the matter was that after the war, television was the great interest. It was a medium that was evolving very quickly. And I think a lot of children were very keen on watching television, and they were getting interested in the stories.
TV Comic arrived in November 1951. It was Britain's first and arguably most successful television-based comic, and its pages were filled with all of the most popular characters from children's television.
TV Comic was an upmarket television comic, and they sort of reproduced every program that was issued was in the TV Comic.
I suppose from the point of view of the publishers and the programmers, that it supported the programs in between the times when they were on, so that children could follow or get more of what they liked.
And I think that TV Comic probably filled that need and that interest.
And of course TV Comic provided an interim period, an interim story between and I think that it was the attraction was that they loved the television program, and they could see them again as they were drawn, you know.
Early in 1960, TV Comic's assistant editor spotted a new television series that seemed tailor-made for the publication. The series was Four Feather Falls, and the assistant editor was Alan Fennell. A deal was done with Gerry Anderson, and Fennell began work on a comic strip adaptation of the popular Western series.
We got a license with TV Comic, which is where I first met Alan Fennell. He was assistant editor on the comic, and we were quite pleased with that.
3 months after the series had premiered on television, Four Feather Falls appeared in TV Comic, with illustrations by Neville Main, who had provided the first cover back in 1951.
"Shucks! Pedro was robbing the bank. Better tell Tex."
On television, Four Feather Falls ran to 39 episodes, but when the adventures of Tex Tucker ended on the small screen, his comic strip exploits kept on going.
"Yep, and we're in the dry season. Had no rain for weeks. Why don't we build a fire engine, Tex, son? Like they have back east."
Four Feather Falls was in the comic when the show had died, but I think there's quite a hangover of interest and a residual follow-through, and as long as something has a readership, then why not keep it going?
He was soon to be joined by a new set of characters and a most extraordinary machine. Supercar had barely cut its teeth on television when it was drafted into the lineup of TV Comic. The marvel of the age made its first appearance in March 1961, drawn by Harold Tamblyn Watts and once again written by Alan Fennell.
"I read the atmosphere of cockpit satisfactory."
Surprisingly for a new series, the strips were not, at first, printed in colour, but in duotone. Also, somewhat unusual, was the decision to depict the characters not as puppet heroes, but as real people. After a successful 6-month run, it was decided to elevate Supercar to a double-page spread, in full colour, now drawn by Lenny the Lion artist Bill Mevin, still with scripts by Alan Fennell.
Supercar started as black and white, that was the show, but such was the appeal of the stories and the property, as we used to call it, that they felt it warranted a full colour spread. And there was no problem about it. I mean, if somebody wants, if there is a demand, then you meet the demand, and that's what the feedback was. So we knew that it was a popular show.
I was put on doing a strip. There was a very famous ventriloquist called Terry Hall, and I was asked to do a strip on Terry Hall, and he had a lion, a puppet, a lion puppet. And eventually, for some reason, I don't know why, Supercar came into Terry Hall. And I just drew this one episode, I think it was, with Supercar. And someone must have liked it. It was the next thing I was offered to draw Supercar.
Satisfactory. Most satisfactory.
Throughout his time on Supercar, Mevin's main contact to the series was composer Barry Gray.
But my main contact was Barry Gray. Barry Gray wrote the music for Supercar. A marvellous musician. I met him in the RAF during the war, and I knew him till he died, and it was over 30 years. And he was a very great friend, and he was sort of a link between me and the studio. And we used to go, my wife and I went there, and we knew them quite well.
For the new double-page spread, it was decided to change the look of the strip to more closely resemble the puppet stars of the screen, making it easier for readers to identify with the characters.
Hello, pilot. Submarine to Supercar. I'm afraid there is no safety mechanism for the torpedo.
I drew the characters exactly as they were on television, the puppet character. I happen to have this knack of reproducing anything I see in front pretty well accurately. All the characters I drew, as I say, they were okayed by the studio.
The series was still in production when Mevin started his tenure, and this allowed him the unique opportunity to visit the film studios and gather his reference material firsthand.
I had the odd picture, but I used to go there and I'd see I'd get the idea from the setup. I'd draw the actual car.
The Supercar strip proved a massive success, and TV Comic also provided the ideal platform for launching the Supercar Club.
We set up a Supercar Club, which was highly successful. We had a half page in the comic promoting it, and we had 70,000 responses in 3 weeks, which was absolutely fantastic.
Bill Mevin's artwork was even given the ultimate accolade, appearing in an actual episode of the second series of Supercar on television. Besides the comics themselves, annuals began to appear based on Gerry's series. 1962's Supercar Annual featured what looked like the next phase in the adventures of the Black Rock team, with the introduction of a spaceship called Super R.
All appears to be in order. Shall we proceed with the test? Monitor rig calling Super R. Pray proceed.
But if anyone was anticipating a new series of Supercar in outer space, they would be mistaken. Gerry Anderson had certainly headed for outer space, but Supercar and its characters had been left behind back on Earth. Even before it had appeared on TV, Fireball XL5 was the subject of a comic strip drawn by artist Neville Main and intended for the forthcoming TV Comic Annual.
Course 52, 0 blue. Planet 75 dead ahead.
It offered a unique, if somewhat inaccurate, depiction of the series.
In terms of spin-offs in that era, the rules and regulations were different from those that have subsequently come into force. So we were free to place the rights for Fireball in TV Comic and in the annual and so forth, anticipating, and it was almost it was a precursor and a build-up. You were trailing the show and building your audience before it happened. The reason today for the rules and regulations, one can understand. You don't want the channel, the station, to be endorsing advertising, and you don't want the series, the program, to be overtly used for advertising to children.
In October 1962, 2 weeks before the series premiered on TV, Fireball XL5 joined TV Comic. Despite being the newer show, Fireball was very much in Supercar's shadow and was given only 2 pages in black and white.
I think we had to do a little bit of convincing to the editor that it was right and proper to launch Fireball in the comic before it had shown on television. But I think he valued our what we were doing, that he was persuaded that this was the thing to do. It wasn't a natural thing to do, but we persuaded him it was, and it didn't do the circulation of the comic any harm at all. In fact, they were ahead of the game.
The creative team from the Four Feather Falls comic strip, Neville Main and Alan Fennell, transferred to the new title and worked together throughout its run, with the scripts closely matching the feel of the television series. The strength of Fennell's scripts for the Supercar strip had by now given him the opportunity to write teleplays for Fireball XL5 while still maintaining his workload for the comics.
Let me see. Steer course 7290 blue, Steve.
1963 saw the appearance of the first of 4 Fireball XL5 annuals. Artist Eric Eden was no stranger to space adventure, having worked as an assistant to Frank Hampson on the Dan Dare strips of The Eagle. With scripts by TV writer Dennis Spooner, the Fireball XL5 annual really captured the flavour of the TV series. As Fireball came to the end of its production run, AP Films embarked on a new and ambitious publishing venture. In preparation for the new title, the Gerry Anderson series made a strategic withdrawal from TV Comic. Supercar's final appearance was in September 1964. Fireball wasn't far behind.
I've just received some more good news from Space City, Steve. Commander Zero has said we can all take a long leave from duty.
Supercar was our first experience of talking to the public in print, followed by Fireball. But we knew that we had material there which was worthy of a bigger audience than we were getting. And the only way to do it is to do it oneself.
Meanwhile, back in 1965, or was it, a casual glance at a newsstand in January of that year might have convinced some that they had stepped through a time warp. There, alongside the likes of Eagle and the Beano, was a glossy new publication with a dateline of 2065. Surely that couldn't be right. It was. TV Century 21 had arrived.
We'd already got our publishing aspirations in place, but I had seen the Eagle comic, which was created by a retired clergyman, Marcus Morris, and that was enjoying a circulation of about 1 million copies a week. It was absolutely unbelievable. I mean, you couldn't do it today. But the standard of editorial and artwork and presentation was absolutely brilliant. And that was our model for TV21.
Its watchword, adventure in the 21st century. The production values were high and the artwork was stunning. TV21 employed the most sought-after and highly respected artists of the day, Ron Embleton, Frank Bellamy, and Eric Eden.
This one's tough, m'lady, but I think I've got it beat.
We looked at what Eagle was doing in terms of artwork. The names were self-evident because they were in the publication, and we sensed that Eagle was in its decline. It had certainly peaked and was on its way down, which is the way of life. So it was natural that we should go out and look at their artists and give them a new home. And they came across willingly because we demonstrated that we could give them an exposure and a palette which was worthy of some of their skills, and some of them were absolutely brilliant artists.
With its 2065 dateline and faux journalistic style, TV Century 21 gave the Gerry Anderson series their own universe.
And I remember going up to Liverpool to Eric Bembro's photogravure printers, and I had the pleasure of pressing the green button to start the press to print our first issue, and we put this on the bookstalls on the Saturday, and of course we were all out there, what's happening, and there were stacks of these things, nothing happening, until the Tuesday when we had a complete sellout.
The man behind TV Century 21 was Alan Fennell.
And he was the editor, and he was a brilliant editor. He was absolutely right. He caught the mood of the moment. He employed the right writers and the right artists, and he delivered a wonderful package.
At the time of TV21's launch, Stingray was the new arrival in the Anderson stable. Supercar, meanwhile, was relegated to a black and white humour strip.
Shh, Pumpkins. This is my ray gun, capable of firing a concentrated beam of light with colossal energy. Watch that rock.
But far grander horizons awaited the crew of Fireball XL5.
Steve, it's impossible. He's wearing a spacesuit.
Beginning from issue 6, the strip was placed in the capable hands of former TV comic and Swift artist Mike Noble, who quickly made it his own.
I think it was the fact that I knew Alan and he knew my interests, and he thought that it would probably suit my style and my ambitions. And I thought I would probably like to have a stab at it.
With Noble unable to watch Fireball XL5 on the TV schedules, it became more important than ever to be properly briefed and given adequate reference material.
They used to send me a script, and they also sent me a specification sheet on which were the main characters, Steve, Venus and Matt, and the Fireball XL5 space vehicle. So this was quite straightforward. I also received some photographs of the main characters, quite large ones, and that was a full frontal, side and back. And they were all, of course, puppets. And I was rather curious to know whether I should do the drawings as puppets in the stories, or whether I should make them more realistic. So I queried this with Alan, and he said, well, I think you ought to perhaps try and do them in a more realistic way, which meant that the heads were in proportion to the bodies.
We were definitely trying to cultivate realism because, as I probably said earlier, puppets were considered to be an impediment rather than a plus.
There was no room for humour in the new strip. Gone were the comic antics of Zuni the Lazoon, who was given his own humorous comic strip on a page entitled Cosmic Capers.
At the time, we were our own masters, and when you're your own master, you can do what you wanted to do. And we wanted to promote Zuni, and therefore he was given his own strip story. If he was being auditioned independently, he mightn't have made the grade.
I saw Zuni in the specification sheet, but nobody seemed to write him into the stories, so I never ever drew him.
One strip in particular showed how far TV Century 21 had departed from the warmth and humour of the television Fireball. In an epic story from spring 1965, an alien ambassador to Earth was assassinated. The images were uncomfortably close to real life, right down to the open-top limousine. "He's been shot! The Kaplan's been shot! There's absolute chaos! Police, guards, Astrons, everyone is running! Quick! Zodiac's moving! Get a camera on him!" TV21 had nailed its colours to the mast. This was more than just another juvenile publication. This was a comic that took itself and its readers seriously. "He's using machine darts! Run!" Throughout his tenure, Noble gradually honed his work, overcoming some initial problems. "Steve, look at this!"
Yes, I'm afraid I haven't ever been able to live this down, but in the list of colours they gave us, they emphasised that this was quite strictly to be adhered to because one or two colours had got a black pigment in it, and apparently when they photographed the artwork, it would pick up the black in any of the pigments that were painted on the artwork. I did take a chance and used indigo on this particular occasion, and I thought that it would give a greater darkness and depth to the sky than perhaps Prussian blue, or a mixture of Prussian blue and brown. But unfortunately, when they came to print it, it turned out like washing up water and looked rather grotesque. So I received a phone call very quickly from TV21 to say the printers were complaining that I wasn't using the right ink, and I quickly reverted back to the Prussian blue I had been previously using.
Following 3 covers by Eric Eden, Noble contributed a memorable cover to what was to become the final Fireball XL5 annual, published in 1966.
Every year, of course, they brought out the annuals, which often were designed and drawn during the middle of the summer. It was rather an extra job, which I didn't relish, because it seemed to take me all my time to produce the weekly workload, plus various small items of illustrations that I also used to undertake. And I'm afraid that the annuals didn't used to pay so well as the weekly publications, so I was never really enthusiastic when I had to do the covers, but I felt under some obligation to do so because the children obviously wanted to see their characters, and the artist who did the weekly work in the annuals as well.
TV21 continued to employ the best artists, and Dan Dare creator Frank Hampson drew a story for Fireball when Noble was unavailable.
Steve, this asteroid's become one huge magnet. We're stuck here for good, like that other ship.
Despite the short break, Noble continued to draw Fireball until early 1967, when he moved onto the newly arrived 0X strip. The following year, he would move on to Captain Scarlet, when TV21 regular Ron Embleton left the strip.
I didn't mind doing Fireball XL5. I felt that it was the first strip I'd done, and I thought I'd improved my artwork over the period I'd done it. In fact, if you compared the first efforts I made to the ones when I virtually finished doing it, I think there was quite a large difference in the quality of the artwork. I think I'd learnt an awful lot in doing it, and I felt I could then carry on improving with Captain Scarlet.
With Noble otherwise occupied, Fireball was placed in the hands of Don Lawrence and moved to the back page of TV21, where it remained in colour until the autumn of 1967. As TV21 geared up for the arrival of Captain Scarlet, Fireball was downgraded to an inner page in black and white. In January 1968, the story entered its last few months in TV21 as a two-page text feature, illustrated with photographs and occasionally reprinted panels of Mike Noble artwork.
I hate to think of the kind of reception we're going to have when we get back to Space City, Steve. He sure isn't going to like losing Fireball XL5.
Staff members were changed, and there was soon a decline in quality. Gerry Anderson strips made way for the likes of Tarzan, The Saint, and Department S, while the next new series to appear on TV was sidelined into its own publication.
But you have to, if you're going to survive, you have to respond to changing times. And just as Eagle lasted, say, I don't know how many years, 5 years, then TV21 was not going to go on forever, so it needed new material.
Century 21 Publishing closed in May 1969, and the new editorial team at Mart Press soon merged the two publications. TV21 took its final bow in 1971, merged with the rival publication Valiant. In autumn 1970, Gerry finally put the puppet series behind him with the launch of the live-action drama UFO. Though aimed squarely at an adult audience, UFO attracted a sizable audience of younger viewers, and it was to this audience that former TV21 art editor Dennis Hooper looked with a brand new publication, launched in February 1971. Heavily promoted on television, with ads featuring clips from UFO, Countdown was a return to the glory days of TV Century 21. Early shows, Four Feather Falls and Supercar, never appeared, but Fireball XL5 made its debut in issue 5, drawn by Colin Page. The tone of the stories was kept serious, and, as with TV21, realism was at the forefront wherever possible.
What can we do, Venus? We're in the hands of that madman there.
I like Fireball because always you could invent a lot more weird and wonderful things. which I rather enjoy.
Given the changing contents of each issue, it was inevitable that no artist would have an elongated run on just one story. A number of different artists would draw Fireball XL5, including Rab Hamilton, Malcolm Stokes, and Brian Lewis.
Mind how you go, Venus.
It was one of the best publications on the market, no doubt about it. I mean, the printing and everything was really good.
There was also no consistent run of writers on the new strips, and this perhaps led to some inconsistent storytelling. But the production process remained the same as always.
You got the script. What I used to do is I'd get the script, and I'd have other work on at the time, and I'd think, right, I'll finish this on Monday or Tuesday, and then I'll do the countdown stuff now. So on the Tuesday evening, I would get the script out just before I went to bed, and I'd read it through, looking at what I was going to do start the following morning. So it means you've got to do some sort of layout. So I use a layout pad usually, and I'll just roughly square off the page like that, and if there's a heading in it, then I will design in where the heading's going to go, or if it's a run-on page, I will then look at the action and think, now how am I going to tackle this? If it tackles with a big picture, as I will show you later, then I would think how I was going to do it, and I think, well, we're going to have the fireball coming in at an angle here like this, so you get your perspective on it and do that. Just to get a feel for the action. Like that, and then you say, this will be slightly different from, right, well, I'll cut that frame off there. So Fireball is breaking the frame. You're going to have the crew saying something or the other, and it might be a big blurb, balloon. So you've got to leave space. You've got to have some space that isn't part of the action, but doesn't interrupt the composition. So as we've got this, I've done a circle here for approaching a planet. That's quite a good area to drop a balloon in. And you might even drop a balloon out of the frame if it so fits, and then the next frame will cut in like that. And you think, oh, let's say the next one we're going to have a chat one. So you've got a couple of people in the so you roughly look at it. This is all composing the page rather than doing the detailed drawing. So I got that far. My next stage is to move it on to the artwork. So I get a decent bit of illustration board, which has got a nice smooth surface which takes ink well. I've always used brushes rather than pens. There's all sorts of little tricks of the trade. Straight lines are no problem. You can still use a brush. Inking in, of course, is quite easy, really. Movement of the spaceships coming in from behind the planet to attack it. Doesn't matter if you go over the line a bit, because that's what we use the process white to here from time to time to eliminate any bits where you go wrong. Let's go on to the head now. For some reason or other, I usually start with the ear, probably because everybody's ear is different, and it doesn't matter if you make a little wobble. One of the things about our hero, which is always difficult for an illustrator. It was decided he'd be a blonde. Now, one of the most expressive parts is the eyebrows. But blonde eyebrows, if you put them in dark, it looks all wrong. If you put it in as lines of hair, which is what I'm trying to do at the moment, it still doesn't work out right, because it makes it look as though they've got their eyebrows lined. So we simply have to try to do the best we can. And I suppose what we do a great deal is use the shadows created by the various features to get it across, because it brings out the shape of the face and brings the nose away. As you see, this shadow here brings the nose away from the flat of the face, makes it stand out. So it is an ongoing process. The difficult thing really is to know when to stop.
Countdown was sadly short-lived, and by 1972 had undergone a name change to the less sci-fi flavoured TV Action. The final issue appeared in 1973, and with it the comic adventures of Gerry Anderson's creations seem to have come to an end. But nearly 20 years later, the puppet heroes found their way back into British comics. When Thunderbirds transferred to BBC Two in the early 1990s, it proved a resounding hit. With it came a new comic. Today, there is still a large and dedicated following for the classic shows and their comic strips. There may never be another comic like TV21, but there will certainly be no lack of adventure in the 21st century. Most satisfactory.